Welcome, everyone, to the community meeting Tuesday, June 6th. I hope you're here to talk about OpenSearch and some of the cool things that are coming out, because that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let's see here. I don't have any coffee with me, so I'm going to be kind of slagging through these slides a little bit. And I'm already messing my words up. Anyways, thanks for coming. We have to get the etiquette out of the way, of course. Introduce yourself before speaking, if you can remember. By the way, I am Nate Boot. I'm a developer advocate for OpenSearch, and between David Tippett and I, we usually run these community meetings. Please mute unless you're actively speaking. Cameras are optional, and questions are available. You can ask questions anytime in the chat or audio, but when we have presenters, we usually prefer that you follow the presenter's preference. If you are a presenter and you have a preference, please do make it known. Otherwise, we will default to this lazy consensus here. Cameras are optional. Questions anytime. Disruptive folks will be removed. We've taken some additional measures to make sure people, we don't get disrupted. So screen annotations have been turned off. Profiles only show names. Only hosts or co-hosts can share their screen, and additional co-hosts are usually around to ensure disruptors are blocked. I hope everyone's here because they typed in the passcode. So in case you haven't learned, passcodes are required to join, and no renaming yourself to things like Nate B or David Tippett with 1 T. And today's announcements, we've got a handful of them. Call for presentations. David seems exceptionally eager to talk about the call for presentations. I only want to add, well, how about David, you start off with your with this, and then I'll add it on.
I will do the shill pitch. So call for presentations is open. It's open until the 16th. So please get those in. If you know someone who's waiting to put one in, have them put it in ASAP. We don't want to miss out on any great presentations. So we're actually adding some more information to the CFP right now. In particular, if you have presentations you'd like to do about vectors, even something about Lucene, we are open to having those talks, whether those fall into the search track or the observability track. We're adding some language about that. Additionally, OpenSearchCon is going to be primarily a one-day event for the tracks and all of that. There should be some events though on either end of it. So keep your eyes out for more information about that. That will be coming hopefully very soon. Did that cover it? I feel like that's
I think so. You even added in the thing I was going to add, where every submission will be considered. So if you're looking at the list of tracks and you think, well, I want to present something, but it doesn't look like it falls in there, please do submit it anyway. And in fact, I'm curious, is anyone holding back in here on submitting a presentation because they didn't think it would fit?
And if you
so all skill levels, all positions in your community will be considered, even if you're brand new and you want to share your learning story, those that would be part of the community track. But technical, non-technical, in any of that will be considered. So please do not hold back on providing us with your ideas.
Yeah, and one other thing, we're actually going to hold a workshop, hopefully Monday of next week, on submitting a CFP. So if you've been curious, you don't know how to submit a CFP, you don't know how to word it, we'll talk about that in a workshop. So
awesome. I didn't even know about that.
That's okay.
Can I go?
Me neither. Yeah, you sure can. It's come together very last second, but
awesome.
Oh, good.
Well, if it weren't for that last second, nothing would get done. Wonderful. Okay, so we are going to have a presence at Berlin Buzzwords, 18th through 20th of June. That's going to be awesome. I will be on vacation in Cancun, Mexico, so I will not be there. But my trusty coworkers and a team of people will be there manning the booth, personing the booth, and making it awesome.
One other thing I just realized we don't have it on here, but there is a Chicago search meetup. We will drop the link to that in the chat. That is happening on Wednesday. I believe it's at 6 or 7 p.m. in Chicago. We'll have more information. We'll drop it in the chat. So if you're in Chicago or near Chicago and want to come to a search meetup, please do. It's going to be hosted with us, Bonsai, and then, Spanning Tree. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Okay, Q2 quarterly survey. I know Aparna, are you in here? She works very hard on these, and we should really provide as much feedback as we can. This is one of the ways that non-code contributions can become part of our guiding force, and so I appreciate your submissions there very much.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Nate. And we are giving an income match in appreciation of anyone filling out the survey. So we will be stopping the survey or stop collecting for Q2, end of Q2, which is the last week of June or the last day of June. So thanks.
Yeah,
Awesome.
So last day of June. Get them in.
Last but not least, OpenSearch 2.8.0 is expected today. It's wonderful, awesome. Tell all your friends. How was that?
That was great.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, nope. And there will be a blog and all of that stuff coming out. So
You and I, as dev advocates, really should look at the planned roadmap in GitHub to see what's coming up in those releases, because I just realized, I haven't done that, and I'm going to make sure to do that before this meeting, because I was about to ask, what's one feature that we're looking forward to here, like what might serve the community most, and I can't think of anything, and that's embarrassing. My bad. That's
all good. I've got one. Search pipelines are coming in beta, so that is a huge one. Also, Ryan, I just saw your question in chat. There are going to be some offshoot events. We don't have exact details, but they're planned for the day before and the day after. So we're getting more information about that out as soon as we can. Thanks for your patience on this, everyone. I know it's coming together a little bit last minute.
Doing the best we can. And it's actually going pretty good, in my opinion. Don't apologize, David. You're doing great.
It's going to be rad. Thanks.
So today's agenda, we've got some overviews of the recent updates to Data Prepper. David Venable is here, and Krishna Kandaka. I think they're going to give us a quick presentation. Are you ready for that?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. I'm going to pause my share and let you take over.
Thank you. Hi, I'm David Venable, and I'm here with my colleague, Krishna Kandaka. We are both employees at Amazon Web Services, and we're both maintainers on the open source Data Prepper project. Today, we want to talk about some new features that are available in Data Prepper 2.3. First, I'll give a little bit of an overview on Data Prepper for anyone who's not very familiar with it. And then we're going to talk about two features in particular. First, Krishna will talk about tail sampling and trace analytics, and how you can reduce the volume of data on your OpenSearch clusters using this. And then I'll talk about our new S3 sync, and also how you can use that with conditional routing to reduce the amount of data on your OpenSearch clusters while still keeping data that is important to you. We have a lot of new features in 2.3, and we're also expecting to release it today, along with OpenSearch 2.8. So there should be a blog post coming out today, and I really encourage you to take a look at it. It'll talk about some of the other features, and it will link you to the release notes, so you can see all the other features that have come through in 2.3. I do think this is a nice big release with a lot of great features, and I do hope that everyone can take a look. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Krishna, and he will be talking about, before I do that, I did want to just do a quick overview of what Data Prepper is. So Data Prepper is an open source project. It's Apache 2.0 licensed, and it's part of the OpenSearch project. It's a last mile data ingestion system, and in particular, it has targeted OpenSearch. So one of the main goals is to get data into OpenSearch. Well, like we'll be talking about today, we also are targeting S3 as a sink. And so in Data Prepper, you create one or more pipelines, and these pipelines get data from an external source provided to a sink. Along the way, you can set some number of processors to mutate the data. So you can parse data if you need, you can normalize your data, you can enrich it. We also have a concept called conditional routing, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, now I'll hand it over to Krishna, and he'll share.
Thanks, David. Hello, everyone. My name is Krishna. As David introduced, I work for AWS. I've been contributing to Data Prepper for the last 9 months or so. Today, I'm going to present you this new feature that we added in the latest Data Prepper that we are releasing today, actually. This is a feature called tail sampling. Just to give a brief overview of what tail sampling is, it is a sampling where the decision to sample or not for an event is made after all sub-events have been completed. Just to give more understanding of this, I will give an example with distributed tracing. This is a good example. So what is distributed tracing? So distributed tracing is a method of observing requests as they propagate through distributed cloud environment. So for example, consider a simple e-commerce kind of an application, right? You have orders coming in, and orders interact with inventory, order system interacts with payment system, database system, and so on, right? This is just an example. There could be more. But in this scenario, imagine when you are the service is receiving hundreds of thousands or even millions of requests, all these different microservices interact with each other. Most of them probably go through fine, but there may be some interaction that either failed or taking longer time and so on, right? So you want to know those things. So the tracing allows you to basically track that whole transaction. So because you don't know which one would fail, right? So you would actually enable tracing for every one of them. So what tracing does is it tags each interaction with a unique ID, okay? And that ID stays from the beginning to all the way to all the different microservices are interacting with each other, the same ID is carried. And all those individual interactions between, say, order and database, or between database and payment system, all these individual interactions have the same tag, and all of them are captured as spans. Individual interactions are called spans, basically. And you can get a real-time visibility of the whole thing from top of the stack to the application layer to the infrastructure and everything, basically. So when you're running such an application, right, and when you're processing millions of the thing, you want to basically capture all these traces so that you can analyze them later for anything that bad happened in that system. So now coming back to the tail sampling. So in Ingestion, we can use tail sampling in identifying the issues in a distributed system like this tracing, basically. So what the tail sampling in Ingestion does is it allows all traces with an errors, or say are samples with traces which have higher latency, or some other specific attribute that you may be interested in. And everything else, which are basically successful ones, you probably don't want to see all of them. So if you see, like, you want to see some of those successful ones, but you definitely want to capture everything that is a little bit abnormal or odd. So that's what tail sampling allows in Ingestion. So what this does is when you do this, your total number of traces will come down drastically. Let's say if 1 million transactions happen in a day or a month, when you apply this kind of tail sampling, you will see very few of them. And that means your observability cost would be very low. You can actually observe the ones which you are interested in. So how did we implement tail sampling in Data Prepper? In Data Prepper, we implemented it as part of part of the aggregate processor. It's a new action under aggregate processor. It takes like few parameters, like a condition. This is a condition that you are interested in, basically. This condition could be a condition that is checking for an error, or checking for a abnormal latency, or checking for some other attribute that being abnormal, basically. So the condition can be specified that way. And there is something called %, which is used to sample the remaining good ones, wherever the condition is false. Then we'll do a probabilistic sampling based on this value and capture that many events only, or traces only. And there is another parameter called wait period, because the traces are a continuous phenomena, right? And this Data Prepper takes each event independently. It doesn't know that there is sub-events associated with it. unless we, and so which means that we don't know when exactly a trace is complete, for example, because trace will have multiple spans and you don't know when the last span came. So we determine using the something called wait period. So if there is no span in that given trace for so long, then we consider that trace is complete, and then we apply this conditional thing of whether we want to sample that trace or not. So pictorially, whatever I described just now, if you see it in a picture, basically the traces are coming to data prepper. It goes to the tail sampler processor. In that we have at the end of the wait period, we based on a condition. If the condition is true, it goes to the OpenSearch. If the condition is false, we send it to a probabilistic sampler where the probability is configured by the user. And then if it says sample that particular event, it goes to the OpenSearch. So yeah, this is what happens inside the data prepper. So today I'm going to demo this. It's a very simple demo. The configuration for the demo is something like this, where basically we are going to aggregate them based on a single given trace ID. So basically all the events for a specific trace ID are aggregated in the aggregate processor. And aggregate processor is a stateful processor. So it keeps them, all of them, until we reach the wait period. In this case, 30 seconds. Actually, for the demo sake, I reduced it. Basically, for a wait period time until there is no spans of that same trace, for that period, we keep on accumulating. And finally, when there is no spans, and then we take a decision on whether a status code 2 in traces, that status code 2 means error. So if the status code 2 is there, then we'll definitely allow it. Otherwise, we'll apply a probabilistic sampler of 20%. And if that returns true, then we'll also sample that. So this is what I'm going to demo now. So let me share my screen. You guys can see this?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
It looks like you have the whole screen shared.
Yes, I'm sharing whole screen because I want to show more than one window here. One of the window here is IntelliJ running the data prepper. The other window is the OpenSearch dashboards window, where I will show when the finally sampling is done and captured, or the tail sampled events are sent to OpenSearch. I will show you here, and I will run a simple application here that will send traffic, trace traffic. So that's why I have a few windows here. So I just started my data prepper here. Okay, so it is running, and it is running with the configuration that I just shared in the last slide. And I'm going to run a simple application. Right now, I can show you that this particular index has no documents in it. Now I will start this script, which actually sends some sample traffic. Basically, here I'm sending 10 traces. Each of them will have 5 spans in it. And one of the trace, for example, the trace ID with 2003 has a status code 2, which means it is considered error in my configuration. So that is one trace that will definitely be sent to the sink. And in the remaining 9, we'll apply the 20% probability. And then some of them, either 1 or 2 or 3, sometimes it could be 0, will be captured basically. So I finished sending the traffic. Now let's go back to the, and refresh this. I guess, yeah. So as you can see here, the 2003 is definitely captured. And among the remaining, we captured 3, 2007, 8, and 9, actually 4 of them. So probability wise, even though I sent it 20%, sometimes it could be slightly higher depending on how the probabilistic nature works. So actually that concludes my demo. Any questions?
Yeah, hey, it's Andrei from Avon. I have a question, please, if you don't mind. Very interesting feature. I'm just a little bit unsure about this, how this waiting period works. Can you explain a little bit more? Just for a flushing of whole traces with collected spans, or it's forcibly closing the spans if they're still open?
So we have a condition that determines whether a particular trace meets that criteria, right? So if it is based on your latency, then you will have a latency-based condition there. So the traces will have a latency field in them, and you would compare the latency field in the trace with the condition that you have. Let's say latency greater than, say, 100 microseconds. And so right? So in that case, we'll capture it. Otherwise, we'll send it to probabilistic sample. Did I answer your question or?
No, it's more about the waiting period, not about the waiting period, which you configure. How this one works? You basically, so lentis example is probably a good one because you know latency when you have the span or trace end time, right? Because otherwise you don't know how much it actually took. And then how this waiting period works? Do you flash on this periodic basis, or you just say, okay, I force trace to be finished because period expired?
I see. Yeah, the waiting period is I am periodically checking whether the last trace was received.
And then you just flash it, or you just say, okay, whatever I have right now collected, I just.
Sorry, 1 second. The wait period is basically we keep on monitoring when was the last span received, and if the difference between the basically it's a periodic polling. Every few seconds we check if the last time a span was received was before the wait period. So if the wait period is 10 seconds, if the last one was received before 10 seconds, then we consider it is complete. So there's a polling happening every few seconds. We go check this. Does that answer your question?
I try to, yeah, probably. And then you don't send the spans to the store, or you like till this period expires, or you do still send them. Like I try to understand.
So we don't send anything to the store until until the wait period is done. Until then we accumulate. Cool. Everything is accumulated in memory until we reach that wait period. Yeah. Okay.
And then if yes, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, Andre. So I actually have a follow-up on this one. Like you mentioned, you buffered things in the memory, and is there some sort of like a setting to do like to protect the memory? Do you have like a force flush or something if like memory limit is reached? I'm just curious what's happening in this situation.
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't have such limit because the tail sampling really the number of amount of the wait period. For example, you cannot set wait period more than 60 seconds, right? So, and usually traces are not that big that they will last for minutes, because each transaction, as you can imagine, in the example that I gave you, right, in a typical example that I gave you, the transaction lasts, have multiple spans and everything, but typically lasts a very short amount of time.
But what if you have a lot of transactions and like 50 seconds can like fill your memory buffer, or you didn't provide like a heap large enough? I'm just curious, what do we do in this situation? I mean, no, it seems like, I think it's a great feature. I'm just thinking because like how do we protect the user, right, from like
the number of transactions doesn't matter, right? What matters is how long each transaction stays. Typically, these transactions are not that long lasting. As you can imagine, the example that I gave you, right? Sorry?
It's both, right? If I have 50 transactions and they last 1 hour, I have to keep for an hour waiting for a condition. If I have, 5 million transactions and they last 10 seconds, it's still more memory buffer, right?
Definitely, in your case, you're right, but I can't see of a realistic scenario where a single transaction lasts 1 hour, right? A typical e-commerce transaction, right? You finish it up, a single transaction in a certain time, right? Typically, they don't take long time, or a banking transaction. All these individual transactions shouldn't take so long.
Yeah, but long is a relative thing, right? Because like I'll give you an example, like audit logs. Sometimes you have to read it and then you have to wait for a condition to see, okay, now I can start analyzing this log. Just an example, but sorry, go ahead. I think someone wanted to ask something. I don't want to hog.
Samuel, this is David Venable. I'm also on the project. I hear what you're saying, and I think that is a concern that we have tried to address to some degree. So there is a configuration in Data Prepper that we call a circuit breaker, and when you have a certain memory threshold that is breached, it will stop accepting data, accepting new data in. And so in that case, what would probably happen is if you reach that threshold, we're going to stop receiving new data, and then we can only build the span based off what is presently there. That's not enabled by default though. But you can enable that, but it's not enabled by default.
Got it. And do we have any plans to like do like a more like to scale the buffer in the future, or we don't see it as a priority right now? Like to do like a spill to disk or something like that if we have to.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think we have considered that in the past. So Data Prepper also has a service map, which we use for stateful processing to build the service map. And we did once have an on-disk buffer, but it actually ended up hindering performance a lot. So right now we don't have a concrete plan to incorporate that, but there could be some opportunities to perhaps use both memory and maybe disk when a certain threshold is reached. But we don't have anything like that right now.
Got it. Thank you.
If you do have any specific recommendations or asks, I would really encourage you to create a GitHub issue in the Data Prepper repo, because I think it would be great to get your take on that as well.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna,
awesome.
for demoing that. Next, I'm going to talk about our new S3 sync, and I have a short demo for that as well. So in this demo, I'm going to be using the example of Amazon VPC Flow Logs. If you're not familiar with Amazon VPC, it is a virtual networking solution provided in Amazon Web Services, and it provides network isolation across your compute resources. One of the things that it also provides are something called flow logs. And these flow logs let you know about traffic that's moving into your VPC, or even within your VPC or going out of your VPC. And so you can imagine, if you have a network, you want to know what kind of network traffic's coming in, right? And so flow logs provide you that. Now, there are a few challenges with that. One, a lot of people want to get their data into OpenSearch and analyze it there. But flow logs actually go into Amazon S3 typically, which of course is great for long-term storage and retention. And customers also want to get this data into OpenSearch quickly. A lot of people we've talked to, they want to look at data that is really recent, and older data becomes a lot less relevant for them. And of course, there's a lot of data. I mean, you can imagine there's a large volume here because we're talking about every network request that comes in and out of your VPC. And you don't really need all of it. And so Data Prepper can help you solve some of these challenges. One, we previously added the ability to read data from an S3 bucket. And so Data Prepper has what's called an S3 source, and it uses an SQS to receive notifications that some new data has been written to your S3 bucket. And that's what I show here on the left of the diagram. So in this architecture, we'll have Amazon VPC sending flow logs to an S3 bucket. That bucket will trigger notifications, and then that sends, or then that notifies Data Prepper so that Data Prepper can load the data. Once Data Prepper gets that data, now we can do useful processing on it. We can normalize that data. We can convert it to the right types that we want. So in this case, we're going to convert certain values from CSV into integers for OpenSearch. And then we can send that normalized data to a destination S3 bucket. And in this case, we're also going to save some of that data to OpenSearch. And we're going to use a feature called conditional routing to send only part of that. This is a diagram showing the Data Prepper pipeline that we have. And so again, on the left, you see the S3 bucket that is the source of data. It's going to go through some processors. I didn't really show them here just to simplify the diagram, but we have some processors to normalize the data from our VPC Flow Logs. And then we have an S3 source here on the bottom. So in the bottom right, you can see that it's writing to a destination S3 bucket. And in the top right, you're going to see that we also write to an OpenSearch cluster. And we have this, this diamond here representing a conditional. And so we can have a conditional called non-internal, and we're going to send non-internal requests to OpenSearch. So in this example, we'll be considering the case that maybe what I really want to analyze is data coming into your system, coming into your VPC from outside your network. And we'll keep all the other data in S3. We're just not going to use it in OpenSearch for immediate analysis. This condition will use something called CIDR contains, which is a function we added in 2.3 as well. This is a snippet from our data prepper pipeline YAML that shows how we create these OpenSearch routes. So in the top, you'll see we define a route. It's called non-internal, and it's using our data prepper expression language. And so we can say an event is non-internal if it does not contain this CIDR. And so we're going to look at the source address, and we're going to see if this CIDR block here, this 10.0.0.0/16, contains the source address, basically indicating, okay, did this request originate from inside of my source? And then down below in the sink, you can see that we define these routes. So we are only using this one for non-internal. By default, every event goes to a sink. But if you define some routes, then only events that match those routes will go to sink. And so in this case, only these non-internal events will match. So I'm going to loop back around to this expression here. I think back in Data Prepper 1.4, 1.5, we added the idea of an expression language, and we've been building that out since then. In 2.3, we added the concept of functions. And so that's where you can see the CIDR contains is a function within our expression language. We also added a contains function to see if something is a substring. We have a length function to get the length of a string. And we are very much interested in adding more. So if there is something you're looking for in a function from Data Prepper, please open a GitHub issue, because we really want to create functions that the community is looking for. Now, this is the YAML for the new S3 sync. So this is a major new feature in 2.3. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we have here. So you can define a target bucket. In this case, it's my bucket. Not super interesting. But you can also define a path prefix so that you can put your logs in some sort of organized fashion. In this case, we're going to put it in a path prefix that has VPC Flow Logs, and then we'll use the year, month, date, and hour. And that just helps organize what we have. You can define a set of thresholds. So Data Prepper will buffer this. You can actually configure it to buffer in memory or on disk, but it will buffer events as they come in. And then when any of these thresholds are reached, it will write it out to the sink. So if you have a trickle coming in, a trickle of data coming in, you might find that the event collect timeout helps, because then you write every 5 minutes, no matter what. If you have more data coming in, then you might reach one of these event count or size in bytes thresholds. And then finally, we also have this codec. Right now, we only have one codec. It's called ND-JSON, and it's going to write JSON lines. Each line is a valid JSON, but the document as a whole is not an actual JSON document. And with that, I'm going to switch over to show the demo. For expediency, I started Data Prepper up already, just so we can get moving along with this. And what we're going to see here, we're going to see a set of logs coming through in Data Prepper that indicate that we have an SQS worker, which is receiving messages from SQS, and then it's going to read the objects that come from here. So we're going to get this data out of the bucket, and then we're going to start processing. And you can also see that we are saving some of this data to the S3 sink over here. You can see the bucket and information that we're saving it to. So here you can see that we have data coming into OpenSearch. We have it visualized in OpenSearch dashboards. I was just generating some requests that should be coming in. And we can see that, we do have data coming from external sources. So here are some IP addresses that are populating data. They're going into the network. So we're not, of course, rejecting requests that come go into the network. And this is what the final JSON looks like. And so this is ND JSON. You can see we have some information about the network interface. We have the source address. And again, you can see for S3, we are saving all the data from from internal requests. So this was an internal request that we ended up keeping. Here's where it went externally. And then you have all the other data that comes from VPC Flow Logs. Thank you very much for your time. That is the end of our demo. Krishna and I are both active on GitHub, and I think I'm going to be available afterward if there are other questions. I'm not sure if Krishna is. And then you can also reach out to us on GitHub. Again, we are releasing Data Prepper 2.3 today, so feel free to take a look at the blog post. Give us some feedback on any of these features. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, David and Krishna. Looks
You're
like
welcome.
we're out of questions for that. So I think for our remaining time, we've got some just open Q&A time. Anyone's free to talk about anything they want. Have we mentioned that there's a call for papers coming up? Call for presentation. We're calling it a call for presentations, not a call for papers.
That's
Okay, well,
funny.
if we
Also, in other industries, it's call for proposals or pitches, or it's a lot of CFPs.
Okay, well, if nobody has anything for the good of the order, I'm curious if anyone has used segment replication yet and has seen any benefit from that.
Not yet.
We're still in the process of testing it.
Oh, I would love for you to come back and tell us how it went.
Yeah, I guess one question that I had was, I also was more about the remote index. I don't know if you want to use this panel for that, or.
Oh yeah, this is open time for anyone to ask anything they're comfortable with. So if you don't mind sharing with the crowd, you're welcome to share anything.
Right. So the remote index is basically you have to configure segment replication. And one thing that is interesting is that I guess the question is, what about replicas is something that we asked, and how and can we also use remote index for like cross-cluster replication scenarios? If we had any plans around that. So basically replicate through object storage as opposed to replicate like peer-to-peer.
Yeah, we definitely need help with that one.
Just to understand the question, are you asking cross-cluster replication using the plugin versus cross-cluster replication utilizing the remote index?
Correct. So, for example, some indices that are so we have like somewhere right where we write an index, and we would like it to replicate to say n clusters, right? By the clusters just following the updates from object storage and kind of pulling the relevant segments.
It's kind of tricky for the write. Like, I mean, if you deleted, if some manager nodes are managing these indices, and you decide to delete, I guess the whole idea is just to understand like when you do the replication cross cluster, then it's literally like there's a replication of the data, and then it replicates all the actions, right? When you have the object store, I guess all you really would really
but we do
with
segment replication, right?
Yeah. Segment replication, when it's talking about that, it's more about
the remote index you can only do with Sorry, Amitai, like segment replication. So remote index, you can only do with segment replication. There is no option to do without.
Yeah, but so I want to just a note on that. When we say, when referring to segment replication as a feature on its own, we're referring to a feature that is GA on version 2.7 and has to do with the way documents are indexed. So when they're indexed to the primary shard, then they are replicated from the segment to the replica shard. That's segment replication as a feature, or segrep, whereas cross-cluster replication is a plugin, and it's not in the core, and it will like replicate indices by copying the data from the shards, right? Like shard to another shard. So it's not exactly the same. Like when we're talking about testing that feature, we're talking about the segment replication that is related to the indexing of the data. And you're asking about the plugin specifically, and that's
Oh no, not
the
asking
searcher
about
nodes
plugin.
can no. Okay.
No, I'm asking if it might. I was asking in the context of segment replication and the remote index feature, if we can leverage that for cross-cluster replication scenarios. That was the question. I wasn't saying like, hey, let's use the plugin necessarily for that one. Like I would love to have a cluster, say, that follows, right, that index. Like the concept of a cluster at this point is becoming a lot more flexible when it can pull like basically a read-only index, right, from object storage.
Well, Samuel,
Yeah,
do you have a means to reach out to Amitai here outside, like maybe in our Slack channel, and you guys could have a discussion about it?
Yeah, sounds good.
sure. I'm there.
Sorry about, just want to ask, you're looking for read-only stuff or just for ongoing application? Because you can use searchable snapshots as well, and that would be read-only part of it. So the same mechanism behind, I guess. Just point to remote store and get the segments on your local cluster.
Andrew, are you asking myself or Amitai?
Oh yeah, probably you, because you initially, I guess I understood what you're asking for, but then you said if you have read-only index, then you probably can use searchable snapshots instead, right? Because it's like a remote part of it is somewhere, and then you just need data on your local cluster. Whatever cluster is, it doesn't matter.
Correct. So one thing was,
it doesn't matter. It matters because of the manager nodes. You have to have the state. Like they're maintaining the state, even when you have the indices in the remote. If they're remote, it doesn't matter. Like there's still a manager node that knows about that index. So how would you query it from a different cluster without loading the state first?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think we should start a thread on this, because I'm curious. I'm not sure I understand completely, but there's a lot in play in that question.
I get the requirement that like the call out is very valid, because you know these things weren't built all together, built completely separately, and putting those two and two together is a pretty good idea. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so just to give you guys like the context, so one thing that we considered was, we were like, okay, what would make more sense, right? Should we have like a cross-cluster replication? So when we think of like a disaster recovery, so we have the plugin and cross-cluster and two clusters talking to each other, and you have to like figure out networking and all kind of stuff if it's in different regions and networks and whatever. Or if you have a remote index that is periodically being updated, and you can keep pulling the segment delta, then that's already your essential replication, right? Maybe you can do that instead. So that's sort of like the mindset behind it. And then the compute is very fluid, right? Because you don't have to configure a cluster especially for that. You should be able to spin up clusters like on demand and, and scale the compute as you like. So this is sort of like the thinking behind it. And I would love to give more, kind of more of the context if you guys are interested.
Yeah, because to me, it sounds like we're talking about similar things, just with different packaging. I bet there could be a few pull requests / documentation suggestions that could come out of this.
It's kind of like there's a lot of things that are going to be very interesting. In particular, when you store data on disk. I mean, basically, you're saying like, if I have data on somewhere, then 2 different data nodes should be able to access that data. I mean, one should, just say, now it's mine. And that can't really be done the way it's stored. So there's a lot of things kind of run deep to make this a possibility, but it sounds like a pretty interesting idea, at least to have a discussion about. Definitely worth it.
Awesome. Well, does anyone else have any questions for the good of the order here? We're coming up on time just a little bit, and of course, I'm happy to stick around as long as there's a good discussion going around.
I was just curious if anybody's tried out Flat Object yet, if there's any feedback on that feature. I posted a link to the documentation in the chat. Oh, I'm Mark, by the way, from AWS.
Oh yeah, hey Mark. Yeah, I personally have not, but I was actually looking at some data sets where that might be appropriate, where if I don't want to have to map every single field, I can just kind of store the whole document and query the subfields. Like I've noticed 2 instances so far of like open source games having a whole bunch of data stored as JSON objects. And I was thinking, man, those are really, like, if you have objects that are really, really nested and you don't want to map every single one, I keep seeing places where that would be useful, but I've yet to try it out personally yet.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, the use cases.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love video games?
Yeah,
well, sure, some people might.
I don't know anybody. I know people who are afraid to become addicted to video games. That's me. But
I'll call out mentioning I plan on using it pretty heavily in the coming months.
Nice.
As part of our kind of ever evolving pipelines, it's not unusual for us to have already kind of a field in our schema this we call unmapped, and thus far I've been shoving it in as like a string, like a JSONified string, or a stringified JSON object more appropriately, I guess. But with that available, I'll probably switch that to the flattened object to see how that works out. And that's just as we evolve then our pipelines and we create new fields and whatnot, we first kind of shove it into that unmapped area until we're sure we want to use the field and evolve the schema. And so then kind of next iteration of the schema would, involve having that field after we kind of consider it prod, if you will. So I love that feature, and I definitely plan on using it.
Awesome. And do you know, like, are you, in terms of feedback, and do you know how to get that into us if you have any issues or questions?
Oh yeah, you won't stop hearing from me if I have problems. Right. Don't worry.
You'll be the first to know. Yeah, that's
everyone else is laughing because they know.
I was going to say that not available on this call. There's a gentleman, Shunsuke-san, who actually opened a PR, I think, for a bug fix on this. I'll reach out to him as well and see if he can comment, because I know he uses it or is planning on using it in FES. So
yes,
I'd be curious to get his. Yeah. So
yeah,
cool.
We did see that bug. So
yeah, no, it's got a good conversation. I'm not worried about that, but yeah, cool.
Cool, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'm trying to think of other good questions that we could talk about. Let's see, do we have a developer on hand that wants to talk about their favorite potential feature in 2.8 real quick? Looks like we got about 3 minutes till end of time. You know, when we get that extensibility catalog figured out, all I want in the whole world is a catalog entry just for themes that will put skulls and fire all over my OpenSearch interface. And it's the only thing I want for Christmas, team. So maybe someone could help me do that, or
I'm gonna say OUI,
Yeah.
man, it's the future.
all right. Well, I think I'm gonna close this down if no one has any other questions.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always. I'm really starting to enjoy hearing the familiar voices and the regulars coming back to share their wisdom with us, and we're really starting to build a bit of a community here, and that's wonderful. So we do appreciate each and every one of you coming.